Should sex work be regarded, respected the same as any other job? Why or why not? The best way to get Reddit to do your homework for you is to confidently and smugly take the opposite position of what you want to write about, and some Reddit nerd will write 10,000 words with sources and MLA formatting to prove you wrong. If Op went to a different subreddit like Change My View and said sex workers should not be regarded or respected the same as any other job, he'd have 1,000 comments giving him all the info he needs. Legalization seemed to really benefit the workers as it brought an underground industry into the light so that it could be cleaned up. The occupational and safety standards helped, and sex workers could gain access to health care for everything from STI tests to physical therapy for stress, repetitive motion injuries. Though there's still work to be done in the industry. I moved into a house across the street from a brothel in Wellington, and it was honestly the cleanest, quietest streets I'd lived on in the city. News.com.au has a brief but interesting article on it. There is an innate problem with your question, as it assumes that all normal jobs are currently regarded and respected the same. Sex work should be legal and regulated like any other professional industry. This would make it safer, which would help remove that part of the stigma. People will still think whatever they think of it, just like they do any other profession. As a caveat, it's absolutely absurd that having sex for money is illegal if you do it in your own privacy, but if you record and sell the footage it's perfectly fine. I think this question conflates feeling respect and treating something with respect. Nobody can tell themselves or anyone else what to feel with any degree of success. What we are able to control is how we treat the people around us and the choices they make. I think what Op is getting at is, should those who choose to engage in this behavior be treated with respect? I think we can all agree that all humans deserve to be treated with a certain baseline of respect. Legalizing and regulating the sex industry would help to ensure that sex workers were afforded that baseline of respect also. Don't know about respected, can't force people to respect it more. It's a value problem, a moral question, and your morality is based on whatever it's based on, religion, Western, Eastern philosophy, etc. Maybe there's an aspect of evolutionary psychology. All of it is summed up in the culture of a society, itself a wide spectrum. The legality of it seems easily definable. The morality of it, however, that's where people start arguing with others why they're right. On one hand, I believe that consenting adults should be allowed to do, and charge each other for, whatever they want to do behind closed doors. So long as all participants agree to the terms of the transaction, I think it should be legal and possible to do. On the other hand, this is an area that is filled to the brim with abuse, human trafficking, sex slavery, pedophilia, revenge porn, blackmail, rape, assault, etc. You could have what you think is a consensual interaction with a sex worker, but have it be related to all sorts of crimes and problems that you don't know about. We as a society haven't been doing very well dealing with any of these issues. How often do you hear a story about sex trafficking and think to yourself, I'm glad that things worked out so well, and everything was handled correctly, and law enforcement was so proactive about it. I know I don't think that very much, and this is not be ragging on police, by the way. It's just a complicated set of problems and we aren't well equipped right now as a society for dealing with it. I would love to see all sorts of sex work be legalized, legitimized and respected. Unfortunately, I think that we have to lay a lot of groundwork and create a lot of safeguards first before that's going to happen. The problem is sorting out which of those problems are related directly with the act of sex work and what is just a consequence of it being mixed in with illegal activity. Alcohol is a good example, as it was once illegal. It was associated with a whole host of organized crime. Now we know that the only things directly related to alcohol issues is disorderly conduct and drunk driving. How many of the issues with sex work are directly related to the act? I find it hard to tell, and would society be willing to make it illegal again if some of the really bad issues didn't go away? Very well put. I think it's morally wrong, but personal opinion aside, If it's made legal, it may be in the right step towards diminishing the abuse you pointed out. I just had my first child, he's 5 months old, and ever since becoming a mother, everything you listed keeps me up at night. As hard as I may try to block those thoughts, reality is that this issue is happening. It's happening somewhere out in the world, maybe even down the street, while my son is peacefully sleeping, and it tears me apart. I went through sexual abuse when I was younger, and I do everything in my power to prevent that from happening to my son. All these issues are connected, and I don't have an answer to any of them. I don't care about adults willingly having that interaction with each other, but when it comes to children, unwilling participants of any age, it just kills me because I know how that feels. I wish we had a clear-cut answer on how to solve this complex problem. I'm just rambling now. I think sex work is extremely complicated and requires a multifaceted discussion of the various circumstances that may lead a person to consider sex work as their form of employment. I think that in today's economic climate, most individuals that engage in sex work do so because their economic status is precarious and they have no other means to attain enough money to meet their needs. This includes single parents, people attending school, drug users, individuals with mental health problems, etc. To me, those individuals are being systemically exploited because the social system under which they live does not provide enough security for them to meet their needs without resorting to a form of employment that is, essentially, a last resort. Most of these individuals being female as well highlights a huge disproportion between the sacrifices that women need to make in relation to men. If, however, and in theory, all of those economic and social insecurities were removed and those individuals' well-being was adequately taken care of by the necessary social structure, basic income, schooling, food, housing, mental health support, drug rehabilitation programs, etc., then those individuals are fully empowered to make the decision to pursue sex work as their line of employment. In short, when sex work is not a last resort but an empowered, informed, consenting choice, then it is perfectly acceptable, and rules and regulations should support the individuals that make that choice for themselves. That's exactly how I see it. If you're sitting on a chair 40 hours per week, you're selling your body too. If you tell your boss you enjoy your work even though you don't, you're faking your satisfaction too. I don't think morals are irrelevant when it comes to work. People should totally try to do the right thing, but having consensual sex in exchange for money isn't necessarily harmful, especially if you compare it to tons of other jobs. Well, in order to answer this question you need to compare it to how you judge other jobs. I'll throw 3 out as a comparison. McDonald's worker, 0 skill required to enter, low paid. Car salesman, some skill required, reasonable pay. Surgeon, highly skilled, highly paid. If you base your judgment on skill level to enter the job, then you're looking at the same low respect you'd give a McDonald's worker. If you base your judgment on money earned, then you're looking at how much you'd respect a car salesman or doctor, which I imagine are very different. And then you get to the real answer. You can't base judgment of respect on someone's job title. I've known doctors who have stolen drugs to get high, some have stolen drugs to sell. I've known salesmen and fast food workers who do charity work on the side. Judge the person, not the job title. Either way, everyone deserves to feel safe at their job, and this protection of potentially vulnerable people is a much better discussion than that of respect. Should we give adequate protection and help everyone who is already in it voluntarily? Yes, rescue the involuntary ones and help them start a new life. I'd quit, but I'm not so big on encouraging people to take up sex work. Maybe it's just me. Many have laid counter-arguments about how in many other ventures we sell our body but not just for sex. I just can't get my mind to accept someone voluntarily wanting to take up sex work. I mean, I don't have anything against sex workers, but I wouldn't recommend that anyone go into sex work either. I think the problem with that kind of work is that you're not really building any kind of skill that allows you to stay valuable over time. You're basically just using a resource that you have for a limited time. I think most of the successful sex workers are young attractive women who are successful because they're young and attractive. My worry is that they'll spend maybe 10 years doing sex work, because it pays better than anything else that's available to them, but their income is going to drop off by the time they're 40, and realistically, much sooner than that. I think it creates a problem of women who go into their mid-30s and lose their source of income, and then they have no marketable skills. It's like the foundation of their whole lifestyle just slips through their fingers, and most of them are not going to have any kind of backup plan. Young people tend to not make plans that account for the fact that they won't be young forever. Agreed. I'm also not sure it's healthy to openly commodify sex, the same way I think the Japanese rent-a-family businesses are creepy, or I would think it unhealthy to rent friends or people to talk to. Ultimately, sex is an incredibly intimate part of human relationships, and I think if there's money involved, that decreases the actual intimacy and turns it into a facade. We're already living in a society where corporations are trying to take over our lives. Social media has basically become a dystopic nightmare where everything from childhood memories to conversations with best friends is being evaluated for advertising opportunities. People are getting caught in isolated and more absurd echo chambers and social bubbles of political opinions created by algorithms that only cater to their most basic instincts, inferiority complexes, fears and biases, the search for an identity and group belongings. And a big part of that is the ease of access. Of course, it's far easier to stay in a bubble where everyone validates whatever you say, whether that's your woke victim complex Twitter bubble that tells you you're brave for identifying as a flower pot and whoever disagrees is a fascist oppressor, or the far-right nutjob conspiracy theory that tells you the Jews are selling children out of your local 7-Eleven to finance their plan to saw the flat earth in half. Than to have an actual political conversation with other people that might include stuff like compromise or disagreement. With regards to sex work, there's already a lot of young people whose entire views of sex are based around pornography, including pornography that's incredibly unrealistic or has been produced under extremely dehumanizing, non-consensual or exploitative circumstances. There are basically two trends. People are having actual sex less and later, and watching pornography younger and more often. Teenagers are being exposed to sexualized violence. The human intimacy factor is reduced. I absolutely do think that sex workers should be safe, and I don't think it should be illegal per se. And obviously every human should be respected. However, I think in the current environment, removing stigma around sex work and treating it like any other job will just lead to sex being just as much of a commercialized product based on exploitation as anything else. I'm not sure we'd be happier in a world where sex-smart superstores on every street corner where you can get sucked off for $20 by a working-class immigrant who hates her job and speaks to you in her customer service voice because it's the only way she can afford her rent are a thing. In fact, I think in that world, people's self-esteem and happiness, both the customers and the workers, would decrease, because you'd be performing intimacy without actually experiencing. Not everyone is gonna respect someone in this field, just like certain people will never respect any type of fields, subjectively. Some people never respect garbage collectors, or retail workers, or teachers, or IT workers. Personal examples, as I know people who don't respect these fields. So even if it should be more respected, good luck getting everyone to agree with that. Edit. Rereading this makes me think I sound like an asshole, which was not the angle I was going for. I respect people doing what they can to make a living, assuming it's legal and not at the expense of others. People are welcome to respect or not respect anything as much as they want. And you're welcome to think they're assholes or not for their feelings. The real question, would you feel good about the status of a close friend or family member resorting to it? For me, absolutely not. I don't think we should normalize it, but there are people who deserve respect. I just do not think it's a good thing to engage in. Honestly, I think the world we live in is too okay with sexualizing everything that we want to pretend fucking for money doesn't harm the mind. Porn actresses have come out speaking of the terrible things that go on behind the scenes and no one cares. And that's from the well-known. Not even the girls trying to make some quick money. If it wasn't mostly drug addicts or previously abused people getting into it, then maybe. But we know majority of sex workers aren't this mystical sex-free hippie we want to pretend they are. I would prefer people who want to get into the sex industry have another way of making money that won't destroy their sense of self. Edit. Just to point out that the question was not about making sex work legal and safe to do it. It was if it would be a respected job as any other. Even the most sex-positive people don't want to sell their bodies. And yes, fast food, Amazon and other minutes-wage jobs indeed destroy your sense of self as well. Yeah, I mean, it's really none of my business who you knock boots with, but I don't think there's anything wrong with regulating it to the degree of making sure both parties are free of disease, or at low risk of passing it on. If nothing else, I don't agree that a man or woman should be able to go out and pick up a prostitute off the street corner without repercussions. Sex trafficking is a thing, but if someone wants to utilize a brothel, it's easier to tack on rules to that sort of environment. I don't know a ton about the ins and outs of this sort of thing, being vague because of that. Yes, and regulated for both safety and legal protection like other personal service jobs are right now, for example, barber, beautician, massage, non-sexual, food service, a whole bunch of others. Legalize it, take control away from traffickers and other exploiters like pimps, and remove the abusive hold police and other enforcers take advantage of. Regulate it, controls for health and safety issues, not least of which is age-related. Make it safe, for those involved, and the greater society that is not. Respect is your individual choice, but historically hardly anything good came from prohibition or ignorance. What you get when you legalize improved health situation as sex workers can claim health insurance and you can regulate something that's legal easier, mandatory health checks etc. And nowadays you could even have a blockchain approach to give them digital health certs to show to customers. Huge income on taxation. Reduced crime as workers will need to less rely on pimps or trying to hide their activity, so overall if things don't happen in the dark, less shady things occur. At least those 3 points would probably form the basic pillars of your hypothesis. I consider sex work to be in the same category as many professional sports players. There are a lot of similarities. They mostly can only pursue their career until about midlife and not much longer, and they sacrifice their own well-being and, often, their bodies for their career. In fact, many pro sports players suffer more serious and longer-term injuries than sex workers. As a society, we have no problem legitimizing and throwing shitloads of money at professional football players and boxers, many of whom walk away with permanent brain damage and numerous other permanent injuries after their short-lived careers end. Yet we lose our shit over the possibility of a woman. Yes, I know there are male sex workers, but they are a tiny minority, abusing their own bodies for profit. This is hypocrisy and yet more proof that his country is still under the rule of religion and male dominance. Legalize, regulate, and enforce regulations. Have it taxed, so that states, federal can gain money from it. The income generated, which is subject to tax, will now also be more traceable, minimizing fraud and extortion that often comes associated with it. Sex victims will be able to report bad actors to the police without fear of reprisal. Regulations may include monthly checkups, which would be safer for the customers and the sex workers themselves. The properties to which the act is conducted will have to be up to speed in regulations, which means safer environments all around. Regulations means that the sex workers will be subject to the minimum standard of employee safety regulations, which means better conditions all around. Legalized work may even cut human trafficking because a large part of human trafficking is from sex workers. However, enforcement and criminal penalties need to be implemented on the bad actors that cause human trafficking. Sex is such a big part of our culture. Sex work should be pushed into the stage instead of buried in the crevices. Edit 1. My first silver. Thank you for the rewards. I'm surprised how much sex work gets demonized, when it's just a service trying to satisfy a demand from customers. As far as respect goes, sex workers are someone's daughter or son. They have sons and daughters, and family. And being one of the oldest professions in the world, I wouldn't be surprising if any of our direct ancestors have done that line of work. It's like saying, should a person be respected or disrespected more because of their job? They're just trying to make a living and make the most of what they have. And when it comes down to it, we're all human. But dialogue and discussion go a long way to normalizing a low bar that people deserve. Edit 2. After reading more about sex trafficking, when it decriminalizes, demand shoots up, promoting sex trafficking. However, with proper regulations and enforcement, sex trafficking can lead to a safer environment, drastically reducing such instances. So there needs to be sensible regulations and active enforcement of said regulations.